changed it again.
They changed them all.
Yeah. Village of Wheeling Workshop is now called to order. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Trustee Hein?
Yep.
Trustee Brady?
Here.
Trustee Hare?
Here.
Trustee Lang?
Here.
Trustee Argyris?
Here.
Trustee Vogel informed the board he would not be here this evening. And President Abascato.
Here. Citizens' concerns and comments?
There are no citizens'
We
concerns.
have none?
No.
Discussion? Mr. Fendios.
Thank you, Madam President. This evening, our first item is an informational discussion and notification to the board in a brief presentation about the launch of the Innovative Entrepreneur Initiative, a pilot program designed to encourage the creation of new business in Wheeling by unemployed or underemployed residents. This program concept was originally introduced to the village's Department of Economic Development by Mr. Praveen Gupta from Excelper IIT, who also enlisted the participation of Mr. Mohammed Fahim from the Business and Career Services. Excelper IIT and Business and Career Services are responsible for managing the program and securing funding through grants and other sources. This program imposes no direct cost and requires no staff commitment from the Village of Wheeling. This is a proactive program aimed at fostering new business startups and job creation, and we're excited about the possibilities.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Madam President, and the other members of the Wheeling Village Board. My name is Mohammed Fahim. I'm the Director of Business Solutions and Corporate Relations for Business and Career Services. You have seen me before, some time back, I guess about a couple of years back. Business and Career Services is our name now. We are also known as the Illinois WorkNet Center in Arlington Heights. And like John was saying, there's this constant thing about people coming in and looking for employment. And we thought, why not do something innovative? And that's where we partnered up with Excelper and Dr. Gupta over here to introduce a concept as a pilot with the village of Wheeling, see how far it goes, that would create a lot of economic development and hopefully jobs, and position us as innovative leaders in the community. So that's what this is about. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to explain to you what the program is. This is the agenda for the program. You have it in front of you. And the mission statement, like John has already stated without repeating it, is it's an economic development and job creation program to educate and equip dislocated workers, that is people without a job right now, to start new small businesses. And the idea is to work with the village, the community, and identify the needs that you have as to what kind of businesses the village should have and must have, and how can we make it happen in a quick, rapid way. That's why the program is called as R Startups or Rapid Startups. It'll have its own dedicated website, which we are in the process of developing, and at no point are there going to be any direct cost to the village with this program, but the benefits are going to be huge. The Village of Wheeling, Excelper, and BCS are going to be the three agencies which are going to be partnering to present this program. And we are going to be doing it in different waves. Wave one is where we are going to be doing the intake of people who are interested, who have a passion for launching a business. And it is not going to be a long, drawn-out process of going to college and getting a 3-year, MBA again. We want to make it happen real quick, and Dr. Gupta would speak to you about how this program works. He has been working on it for quite some time. A very prominent author, great writer, and a great thinker on innovation. Dr. Gupta?
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Madam President and Mr. Manager, and the esteemed Board of Trustees here. So we have anticipated that in America, in our communities, we would need these jobs at some point in time because of businesses going down. Large businesses can afford, and new businesses have to come up with. So we developed this program 10 years ago, and we've been teaching at IIT for the last 7 years. Now it is taught in 5 universities around the country. and in Mexico, and now we have tried different communities. I think Wheeling, its name related to the best innovation of the ages, Wheeling. And so I think it's wonderful to see that we are starting this program in Wheeling itself. And it has 3 phases, and the phases are enlist and selection, where we want to look at the community residents. First thing is the businesses for the community, by the community. So we want to have this collaborative process. So enlist and select those people who want to pursue their passion. So we want people to realize what they're best at, and then how can they start a business for the community and be successful. And that's how America was built in the 1920s and 30s. And then educate them and create new solutions very fast. And I've been an entrepreneur myself. And we have realized that it should not be a complicated process. It shouldn't be very sophisticated to develop the business plan and all these details. The goal is for passionate people, create something and sell it to solve the problems in the community. And if that works, they have the business. So educate and innovate, so they will develop the solution. And the third part is, which is very different and makes a unique program among all entrepreneurship centers around the country, that we want to have this called Business Development Network, where we have all the stakeholders in the community. It could be the bankers, the service providers, attorneys, the law, you name it, corporations, executives, former and the current. Their purpose is, how do you make these businesses successful in the community? So that's what's going to make it work. When I came from India in 1980, I was in Georgetown, Texas, and I went to the barber shop, and this is the world's largest barber shop. So we were so proud of whatever we had. But now we think everything comes from a different country around here. We want to bring that sense of community in place where we see, we have the best place in the world. Doesn't matter, but this is our world. This is the best place in the world. And so a 2-step process, not the very complicated process. Innovate and sell. And if you notice, in any business, if you don't sell, there's no business, no matter how much infrastructure you have. So we want to develop those skills in people, the passionate people. How do you create the marketing campaign? How do you sell it? How do you close the deal? How do you make money? And once they grow, then we can have this scaling up process where they could become large businesses, they could become small businesses. Some of them become very big, some of them will remain small, some of them may not survive for different reasons. But this is what we will have, Business Development Network, and this is not inclusive list or limited list. It is to involve as many people possible to make those businesses successful. And we do recognize that we would love to do it, and it needs to be done with the village and the community. It's not the government and non-government, is the leadership. If the community has to be involved to make those businesses work. And so to summarize, I think we have been very privileged to work with Drew and Peter and other members in the community and John's support here. But I think it requires a whole village to raise a child. It requires a whole village to raise a business, but it does require that. So team of Excelper, IIT, Business Career Services, Wheeling Economic Development Departments, we have taken up a challenge. We have taken up a challenge that could be a role model, that could be a process to be used throughout the country, throughout the state, and we appreciate your leadership and support. Thank you.
We're very proud of this program because it demonstrates 2 of the most important aspects of what we do. One, it shows that we're looking at business in a new light, taking the lead in giving our residents and our entrepreneurs the opportunity to succeed and build a business and hopefully stay in our community. But it also speaks to the true definition of economic development in that we're not just trying to fill empty space. We're actually trying to partner both education with business in order to give our residents and our existing businesses something the ability to grow and stay and expose our community at a much larger scale. So we're very happy with this, and certainly we can answer any questions should you have any.
Trustee Lane?
This is a great program. If I was a potential startup business, what would my financial commitment be, or what would you, on average, what would you think that individual will have to have in the way of money to put towards this themselves?
You want to answer that for me? Go
I
ahead.
think the intent is, and how it realizes, we are still developing and looking for the resources. The intent is to really find first the people or the residents who are passionate, who are skilled, who are committed, and who can work hard, and who can give everything. That's number one. Now the question is, would they just bail out in 6 months, 5 months, 3 months to hold them accountable? We want to have some stake in it. and those numbers are going to be worked out in the process.
I wouldn't imagine it would be the same price for every type of business.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. The startup costs are going to be almost the same. We are still working out on some of the numbers. We are trying to see what is happening in the market out there. I mean, you could start a business with $5 to get a business license. You could start a business with $1 million. But what is it going to take to make it successful? And obviously, John was mentioning that we are trying to see if there's any kinds of grants available through any corporations, foundations, through the workforce system. And if we can prove that this model works, then it will be self-sustaining. So to answer your point, Trustee Lang, at this point, no specific numbers. There is going to be a cost involved with it. And we would expect some of the people who are coming in to put some skin in the game. Otherwise, it will just be passion and they will bail out in a few minutes. Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again
appreciate
for
it.
having us over here, and we hope to make this a success for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Discussion utility tax. Mr. Monashane. Your turn next.
Thank you very much. I have a very brief presentation tonight, which is intended to follow up on the budget workshop that the board held in December. If you recall, at that budget workshop meeting, we were discussing ways that we could raise additional revenue for the Capital Projects Fund, which has always been earmarked for infrastructure projects and building projects, and also provide some relief for the general fund as well. And the consensus at that budget workshop meeting was to increase the gas and electric use tax. So I want to talk about that briefly and then answer any questions you have, but we're looking to try to get some direction from the board tonight on how to move forward with the ordinances. Briefly, about 10 years ago or so, the village board implemented a gas and electric use tax. And again, that money was earmarked for the Capital Projects Fund to be used for infrastructure needs. And I want to just talk briefly about the difference between a use tax and a utility tax. A use tax is a rate per therm for gas or per kilowatt hour for electricity. And so it increases with use, not the price of gas or electricity. If you have a very cold winter, people are using more gas and electricity, the village collects more revenue than they would otherwise. If you have a warm winter, we collect less revenue than we would otherwise. A utility tax, which several communities have, is different. It's a percentage of the total cost of gas or electricity. And so obviously that increases or decreases with the price. Here is a brief survey I did of some communities in this area just to show you where they're at in terms of the maximum that you can levy for gas or electric use or utility tax. And Wheeling at the top, currently we are at 73% of the maximum rate allowed by state law for electricity and 48% of the max for gas. There are several communities around here that are at the maximum rate for both gas and electricity. You can see Buffalo Grove, Arlington Heights, and Lombard. And then there are several that are have lesser taxes. Some tax only electricity and not gas. And some are close to the maximum, like Glenview, but not quite there. So that just gives you a feel for the various options that are available. And I can come back to that if anybody wants to look at it. So and when we discussed this at the budget workshop meeting, the thought was to increase the tax at that time to a level that would raise approximately $500,000 more for the village. Since then, I've done some additional research, and I just wanted to present the board with another option, which is to increase the tax to the maximum rate allowed under state law. That would generate, if we did that for both gas and electric, that would generate $1 million a year in additional revenue, so an additional $500,000 over what we contemplated in December. And in terms of impact on residents and businesses, right now, residential customers pay about $2.59 on average per month for the electric tax. The maximum rate would take that to about $3.55 per month, which is 96 cents more per month in tax. On the gas side, the residential customers are paying about $2.04 a month on average. The maximum rate is $4.26 or $2.22 more per month. If the village were to go to the maximum rate for both gas and electric, it would cost the average resident an additional $3.18 per month. On the business side, most wheeling businesses for electricity are considered small commercial or industrial users, and they're currently paying about $31.22 on average per month. The maximum rate would be $42.78 or $11.56 more per month. And on the gas side, most wheeling businesses are in a category that's termed commercial users. 66% of them are. The other 34% are industrial users, but the commercial users currently pay $17.86 per month. The maximum rate would be $37.21 per month or $19.35 more. And the total impact of an increase to the maximum rates for businesses would be $30.91 per month. So again, the board has some options available to it. We're just looking for additional direction tonight. We can increase rates, as we discussed, so that we generate another $500,000 a year in revenue. It can be split any way you like it. One way could be $250,000 from the electric use tax and $250,000 from gas. Or we could increase the rates to the maximum allowed, which would generate another $1 million or $1.1 million per year in revenue for the capital projects fund. And then there's, of course, other options. It could be something less than the maximum, but more than what would generate $500,000. So, there's a lot of options available to the board. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Before we get to questions, I just want to make sure that everyone is clear. As you see on this slide before you, we had talked about increasing the utility tax to $500,000. So that's what the board has already discussed and settled on. So our question this evening really is how we would like to create that $500,000. As Director Monchain just said, we have some options as to how we get to that number. The rest of the presentation, unless the board would like to increase the amount of the utility tax, is really just informational, as there was some question as to what is the utility tax, how is it collected, and where do those funds go. So specifically what we're looking for is direction on how the board would like to see us between gas and electric split up this or come to the $500,000 number. And if the board would like to consider a larger number, that's fine, or it can also be left to as an option in future fiscal years. So with that, I think we can discuss some options.
Mr. Lang, Trustee Lang, and then Trustee Brady.
Thank you. We with the electrical, what was it called? Electrical
Aggregation.
Aggregate?
Yes.
As a resident, I've saved a bundle on that program. Is there a similar program for gas? I thought there was something.
There is not. The state does not allow yet for the aggregation of natural gas. There is a push for the state to eliminate the exception that it currently is, but as of right now, we cannot aggregate the purchase of natural gas.
Okay, well, as it goes with the electric, it's a complete wash with how much I'm saving and how much more it would cost if we even maxed it out. And I think I would prefer maxing it out at this point. I don't think it's a huge increase at all, given that we have such a huge savings already, as long as that still stays, that savings stays with us for years and years. So, thank you.
Trustee Brady.
with this tax we're talking about, especially on the electricity, I too, as most of us here in town, have realized quite extensive savings in our electric bill. What has that done to our revenue?
It hasn't impacted our revenue.
Well, if this is based on sales or use or dollars?
It's based on the number of therms that you use or kilowatt hours. So even though you're paying less for electricity, the tax that we're collecting is the same, assuming that you use the same as you did, let's say, a year ago.
Well, in an effort to get this year's or next year's budget, this year's budget passed, I agreed to this increase, but I want to see it go any higher. You know, I still am a fan. If we're going to tax somebody, let's give them the opportunity to deduct it on their real estate tax. All these taxes here and there, and you know, in every drawer, and people just pay; they can't recoup anything. At least if it's on their real estate tax to cover whatever the needs of this community are, they can deduct it on their yearly end taxes.
Are you saying then you'd like to keep it at the 500,000 or raise it to the max?
Keep it at 500,000.
Thank you.
And Trustee Jers had a...
I have a question. We created this about, what, 10 years ago, was it, Mike?
Yes, originally we created a 1% tax, and then a couple of years later, we increased it to 4%. And when I say 1% or 4%,
Right.
that was just an estimate of what the tax would have been if we had a utility tax in place.
And I remember the original proposal was to create the tax, and basically the money, the revenue was going to go into the general fund, and the board at that time, including myself, was against that. We wanted to earmark it to capital improvements so the residents, the businesses can see capital improvements being done to the community. Millions of dollars have been raised since. Millions of dollars of capital improvements been done. But a trend the last couple of years where the little magic savings account for capital improvements were dipping in to balance budgets. I like to see a plan on what we're talking about with capital improvements. If we're going to max out what's allowed by the state, I want to see a game plan here. Because you mentioned general fund. And during the budget hearing, we talked about capital improvements on the bonds that we did for the structures that we built here, the Village Hall, the Fire Department, Public Works, Police Department, and everything else. I like to see more earmarking of these dollars. I don't want to see an extra $1 million come in. I would love to see an extra $1 million come in, but not see it come in and do nothing with. I want to see a game plan. I want to see, are we going to reduce the bond debt with it? Are we going to earmark certain dollars to capital improvements over and above what they're collecting today? And what projects have been put on the back burners? Because I know there's a lot of street programs and other programs that are 5, 6, 7 years in arrears that we haven't done because the funds haven't been there. So I would challenge staff to sit down and come up with a game plan on how we're going to earmark those dollars, what we're going to pay for, and live by that, versus dipping in $500,000, $750,000 to try to balance the general fund budget.
Absolutely. We have, as you know, a CIP, a capital improvements program that will come before you in the coming weeks that does exactly that. It's a multi-year program that lays out all of the capital projects which deal exactly as you said, street improvements, water main, although that's a different issue, but it does lay out all of those capital projects. But you bring up a good point, which is paying for the servicing debt on some of those bonds where we can allocate, however we want to do it, whether it's a portion of the existing income or a portion of this new revenue that would go directly towards paying down that service debt or paying that service debt. Either way, an increase in the monies coming into what is allocated as a CIP would free up some monies that, from the general fund right now, and it would help us realize some of these projects that have been put on the back burner.
But what's funny, we're going to get the budget, you said, what, in another month or two for the CIP?
Less than 2 months, sure. Within about 4 weeks, sure.
But if you look at the trend the last couple of years, probably 80% of those CIP budget items are not funded. Majority is not funded compared to what is funded because there's no money in it.
That's correct.
That's correct. So I like to see a game plan here. What are things that are a dire need right now that need to be done? Because you know what, we have staff with capital project managers and stuff like that, and every year I'm seeing more and more being done, less being done than what we projected to do in the future. Mm-hmm. So Again, if we can relieve some of the debt, if we can pick up on some of the projects that's been on the back burner for the last few years, I think you could justify doing this because you're actually, like we did it originally. Let's give back to the community. Let them see uniform fencing, street light programs. All that stuff came out of the utility tax because it didn't go into the general fund. It was earmarked. I want to see an earmarked plan. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, what we're going to do, because you're talking $1 million a year additional revenue that we can do a lot with.
Right. And as you know, we have a lot of streets in town that need to be repaired.
Right.
And to put this in perspective, right now, that fund brings in about $1.7 million a year in revenue. At its highest point, it was at about 2.1 before the economy tanked. So an additional $1 million is probably a street project every year.
Sure.
You know.
Or help with the servicing debt on the bond.
And I think your other point is well taken, that we need to come up with a policy as to how much of that money, if any, is going to be used for debt service purposes, and then stick with it going forward. Because it has varied from year to year as we've tried to deal with the general fund deficit situation. But it would be great to have a policy that said, you know, from this point forward, this is what it's going to be.
Right, half the servicing debt or whatever the case may be, or a percentage of that servicing debt is going to be covered by this.
Right.
So Trustee Juris, the max along with the set plan?
Yes.
Or the 500?
Well, the 500 right now is a Band-Aid based on the budget.
Correct.
That's all that is.
But that's the question.
I wouldn't do neither one until we come up with a game plan here.
Okay, so you don't want to do
it twice?
either.
Well, no, we're asking now. We have a game plan. The CIP is created, and the projects are set for this year are already approved through the budget. So the game plan exists. So we will present that to you as we do every year as part of the CIP that comes to the board. So we could discuss that in specific.
But option one is a 1% increase. That's all that is.
Option one is what the board approved.
Right, without knowing about this maximum amount by law.
Correct. So we can either increase the amount or stick with the original game plan of 500,000.
Again, I like to see what we can do if we max it out. I don't want to do a 1% today and give direction on that or consensus on that, and then a month from now we sit and have a workshop and we come up with a game plan regarding servicing debt and other CIP programs, and then go back to the public again and max the thing out again. Let's do it all once right the first time and be done with it.
Agreed. That's why what we would do is, depending on how this meeting turns out, we will create the legislation in order for you to do that. But I think for this year, really tonight is either we stick with the 500,000 and leave the option to move to max to fiscal year 2014, or we stick with the plan that has already been approved. There shouldn't be any pressure on the board tonight to come up with a solution. The 500,000 is already how we've planned, so there's no need to feel pressure tonight to make a decision beyond what has already been discussed.
But remember, the 500,000 is an increase every single year.
Yes.
It's written in stone. The 500,000 was to try to balance the budget for this upcoming year. What's the game plan moving forward?
Well, it's a tool to increase our revenue sources, yes.
Right. Okay. And again, I'm looking for direction from staff on how we can allocate and earmark those dollars to give back and show how we're paying either debt or coming up with capital improvement projects that haven't been done all these years. That's all.
And we can do that. I think we just need to know how much money we're working with. And that's why the question is before you tonight ahead of the CIP.
This is,
Trustee Hunt.
thank you. It's my understanding that we're going to use the total fund, whether it be 500,000 or 1 million, we're going to go into the capital project fund. If we are going to go to the max, I'd like to see us split that up. Because one of the things I think that we also have to be very concerned about is the public safety of our community and our residents. And when we did some budget cuts, we took out some people in the fire department that I'm very concerned about, and the police department. And I'm looking to see if we can possibly use some of this money to start putting back some personnel to get our people up to par and get our game plan going better in the fire department and police department.
I think that if, by increasing the use tax, it provides relief for the general fund. And to the extent that it provides relief for the general fund,
I understand that.
there's more money available for those types of things.
I understand that.
Okay.
Madam President.
Trustee here.
Thank you. I understand where you're coming from, and I understand what was said by my colleagues down at the other end, too. Like Trustee Juris, I think getting a game plan how we're going to spend this money, I think that's what's important for the community. We can say, oh, we want up here. Yeah, let's increase. But when people don't see physical things being done in the community, they're going to go, well, then why did you raise the utility tax? So I guess that's why they call this a workshop. This is just to get a feel of how, I would have no problems increasing it. And I would like, as well, like the village manager said, come back with a plan and say, okay, this is what we're going to do with the money. And I know you've done that. And that's basically all I have to say. I think it's going to be well worth it as long as the projects get completed.
I guess the question is, when the plan, because we're looking at the plan, let's say with the max, when the plan comes and we decide, okay, we don't want to use it for the max, can we then say, all right, we don't really look at the max because we don't have enough for that plan, or this plan is not applicable at this time? Or if we say tonight, the max, and then come with the plan, then you'll have the plan fit the max.
I think the easiest answer is the plan, without filling in the names of, say, the streets. You know, capital projects are defined by, as Trustee Urgira said, the uniform fence, streets. Those are capital projects. So the answer is, without saying it would be Anita, or it would be, you know, the answer is, as Trustee here said, the public will see new projects being done if this rate is increased. There is a question, however, if the board would like to set a policy that says X amount is earmarked for something, we could talk about that. But the answer to the plan is we can fill in the blanks as to what streets are being done. And we are going to do that regardless of how tonight comes out as part of the CIP presentation. But in general, the answer is if this increases, so do the projects that the public sees and uses every day. That's the general answer. And as Director Monchain said, it provides relief to the general fund, which then allows for, it opens up other monies for other possibilities.
If I may?
Yes.
Just to piggyback on Director Monchain's comment, is setting a policy in place that you live by.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than just streets. If we're going to get an additional $1 million plus a year, let's set a policy. A percentage goes to this, a percentage goes to that. It's going to be earmarked towards streets or whatever the case may be, or servicing debt, knocking down our debt. I think with the bond agencies, that's showing being proactive, and that helps our bond ratings down the road. That we're taking proactive approach based on new revenues that we're generating to help our servicing debt, and in return helps our bond rating and our credibility. That's what I'm looking for. Not so much what street we're going to do next year or this year, but the policy that this board is going to approve or not approve based on your recommendations.
Sure. And I think we just need to know what that starting point is. But absolutely,
you gotta go to the max.
What you want.
But I think you go the max and justify, and this is why we're doing this.
We will.
Which is a relief for the general fund, which in return is a relief for future tax levies too. Right?
Yes.
Which would be presented, what, in about?
Which we can do as part of the CIP. Well, we could do it the same evening as the CIP, so that there's both sides of it.
Right.
The projects in specific, and then the financial policy that would accompany it.
So the direction is max? Trustee Lang?
Yes.
Trustee Brady?
No.
You still the 500? Trustee here?
Yes.
Max? Trustee Hein?
500.
And Trustee Agiris?
Yes.
Max. and myself, Max. So that is the direction, and we will go forward to be able to give back to the community.
We will present both of those then on the same evening, both the financial
you.
policy as well as the actual projects themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manischewitz. Elaine? Go. Wolf Road Rehabilitation, Mr. Fondelis.
Thank you, Madam President. Several weeks ago, we gave a presentation to the board about the potential for a jurisdictional transfer of a corridor on Wolf Road. There was a lot of information provided to the board at that meeting, and we wanted to give the board an opportunity to digest some of that information, as there are a number of choices that need to be made. Tonight, Director Janik is going to walk through a very brief synopsis of what has already been presented to the board. There is no new information that the board will be seeing tonight. However, we would like to, now that you've had some time to settle with some of this information, see what direction the board wants to provide. So at the end of tonight's presentation and any questions and answers that need to happen, we're going to ask these 4 questions. One is the jurisdictional transfer. Do we or don't we accept the jurisdictional transfer? An item about roadway lighting and traffic signals, sidewalks, and then burial of overhead power lines. And Director Janik will walk through each of those categories. We do have the presentation that was provided to the board several weeks ago ready for reference should anyone need it. And after Mark is done, we can answer any questions in order to lead us into these 4 items for direction. Mr. Janik?
Okay, good evening. I'm going to go through, there's a memorandum that you all received, and I'm just going to go through that memorandum relatively quickly and then open up for questions. In October, as you may remember, I did a presentation relative to this topic, and it was both a pro and a con. It was either, it gave ideas for accepting the jurisdictional transfer, and then it gave pro and con for accepting it. Not accepting and then accepting. What the memorandum I wrote recently is assuming that the jurisdictional transfer would be accepted by the board. And there's, as John mentioned, there are some costs associated with doing that. Some just come naturally with the jurisdictional transfer, and some are a choice that the board can make. Number 1 are the ongoing maintenance costs. If we do accept the jurisdictional transfer of this section of Wolf Road, we will be spending approximately an additional $45,000 per year. Mostly this is snow plowing, salting, but it's also will be taking care of the new infrastructure of the roadway itself, the storm sewers, the curb and gutter, that sort of thing. Long-term, number 2 would be long-term maintenance and repair costs. At some point in the future, all the roads in the village need to be ground and overlaid with new asphalt, or they need to be reconstructed. This roadway would be the same. We're assuming, although we don't know for sure, but we are assuming that this road for jurisdictional transfer purposes would be made out of concrete. It would be a reconstruction of the roadway, place down new gravel, and then concrete on top of that. We're expecting that road, especially with reduced truck traffic, to last 30 to 35 years. But at some point, repair to that road, reconstruction of that road would take place. Our estimate on a long-term basis is $102,000, or approximately $100,000 a year. Not that you would actually place that to the side per year to, at some point pay for the reconstruction of this road, but just gives you an idea of how much money it will take at some point in the future to repair the road, and money that the village would have to come up with to do that. There was a question at the last meeting in October relative to another section of Wolf Road. I believe Trustee Lang, you had a question about whether or not the southern Wolf Road between Hintz and Palatine Road was on the agenda for the state to improve. As you all know, it goes from 4 lanes to 2 lanes and then goes back before it gets down to Palatine Road. That project has been taken off the books for IDOT to do a reconstruction. We looked into it, and that was your question, and it's not on the books for IDOT to complete. Third cost that we were tracking is additional sidewalks. The plan that IDOT has relative to this roadway improvement would include 5-foot sidewalks on both sides of the roadway. Some of the sidewalks that are existing would stay, but then where there weren't sidewalks and where the sidewalks are damaged, IDOT would replace them. As you might remember, the last meeting we have a plan for adding or including an 8-foot wide sidewalk on one side of the road. Actually would switch. North of Dundee Road, it would be on the west side. South of Dundee Road, the 8-foot walk would be on the east side. That would be to improve pedestrian safety and traffic up and down Wolf Road. It would also be in keeping with the recent pedestrian and non-motorized plan that the village was presented with and accepted. That would cost approximately $320,000 if we decide to do that. That would be an extra cost. Number 4 is roadway lighting. The roadway as proposed would not include new roadway lighting. The IDOT would replace lights alongside the road, but they would not put in new lights. What we have planned would be new lights, same design as on Milwaukee Avenue, and the same design and spacing that would be put on Dundee Road as we are planning right now. The additional cost for this is approximately $1.1 million. We are trying to get funding, an 80-20 funding, grant funding through the federal government for the lighting on Dundee Road. We'd be doing the same thing for Wolf Road. We don't know if we can get that, but we are making steps to apply for that funding, which would reduce this cost, but we can't guarantee that we would get it, particularly since we've already applied for lighting grant on Dundee Road. The savings on that would be approximately $700,000. Number 5, the most expensive additional cost would be power line, burial power lines along Wolf Road. That's a little bit different in terms of payment. It's a $4.5 million approximate cost. That cost would be paid for, the upfront cost would be paid for by Commonwealth Edison, but then it will be charged back to the electricity users in the village, residences, commercial, and businesses. The approximate or the estimated costs per user is listed on the memorandum here. We went through this before. We expect that the burial of the lines would take place over a 3 to 5 month period, and that's the period that ComEd would charge these costs off. They would charge them during the construction process. So those are the topics for tonight. And again, the memorandum I wrote assumes an acceptance of the jurisdictional transfer. I don't want to assume that the board would do that, but for purposes of discussion tonight and costs, we assume that there will be an acceptance of it. And then the question is which of these or if all of them the board would want to include as part of the project.
Thank you, Madam President. We have a couple of other slides and a map, and we can show all that, but I wanted to, as Director Janik just concluded, tonight we're not asking the board to agree to a contract that would be the jurisdictional transfer. There was a letter that the village received that we need to respond to, which was IDOT's initial proposal for, are you interested in this jurisdictional transfer? If the board says yes tonight, that's when staff can go back to IDOT to negotiate the terms of the transfer. There aren't too many parameters that are able to be negotiated. However, one of them, as Director Janik said, is the material. Would it be a concrete road? So just to be clear, we're not asking for the board to agree. There are no terms yet. You are saying, yes, we agree in theory that we'd like to move forward with the jurisdictional transfer. So moving down the list briefly, staff would suggest that if the board blesses the idea of a jurisdictional transfer, that the lighting and the roadway lighting, traffic signals, and sidewalks as presented here, that is staff's recommendation, that we go ahead with those changes, and those are the costs associated with them. Of course, we could talk about them in detail. And number 4, burial of ComEd overhead power lines. The burial of power lines is an initiative that several board members have talked about in the past. It is not a necessary option. However, it is a very prominent visual. I guess you can talk on both sides of that. You could call it counterproductive to the aesthetics of that area. That corridor is being developed, and there has some future developments that are at least on paper at this point. So we do know that corridor is going to become a more major thoroughfare in the future. However, burial of power lines is really just an aesthetic decision that the board has to make. This is the time to do it if you would like to see those lines buried. There is some recognized benefit to burying the lines when it comes to outages. While it doesn't solve all the problems, it certainly aids in having less frequent power outages. So number 1 is really the big question, and number 4 is also a larger political question. But again, numbers 2 and 3, staff would recommend as presented that we move forward with the lighting and the sidewalks. So with that overview, there are a couple other slides that we can reference. There are traffic counts available if the board would like to talk about what traffic counts there are on both Wolf Road and all of the leading roads to that corridor. And there's a map, and we can get into all of that should the board wish.
Trustee Lang, you had a question?
I have a ton of questions on this, but you mentioned traffic counts, so can we get into that? I
Sure.
had asked you to look into traffic counts for this.
Is that the next slide?
I don't believe we have that slide.
I think Andrew added it this afternoon. There you go. I can do this. That makes it a little easier. The numbers, it's a little hard to see on this graphic, but Wolf Road is listed at
13,300.
13,300. That's peak per day, correct?
Both ways, that's correct.
Which number are we looking at, a red number or a black?
We're looking at the yellow numbers, actually.
Oh, okay.
South of Dundee Road, 13,300 for Wolf Road. Dundee Road's at 28,000.
And we would only expect that number to increase as the developments at the most northern points of Wolf Road, where Wolf and Milwaukee meet, continue to develop.
What would that compare to Milwaukee, and also there should be a slide up there for Elmhurst Road? And
Milwaukee is approximately 30,000. At the corner of Dundee and Milwaukee, it's approximately 30,000. It's slightly different north and south of Dundee Road, but it's approximately 30,000. It looks like it's 28,000 south of Dundee Road and 30,000 north. Wolf Road drops off a lot to the north. Looks like it's about 9,000 to the north of Dundee Road, but there's a lot more to the south.
Route 83, Trustee Lang, south of Dundee Road. South of Dundee Road is 17,900, and north of Dundee Road is 12,700, and that's north and south of Dundee on Elmhurst Road.
Okay. All right. So really, we could say that Wolf Road is the least traveled of these village roads right now.
Correct.
Okay.
Of course, the other roads are 5-lane roads.
Okay. And that's that. that leads to my decision, or part of my decision as well, is, you know, if it's a least traveled road, why would we be dumping a lot of money into it? I'd rather see the money go into roads that are well-traveled. But you're saying there could be an increase in?
We imagine there would be. There is a lot of residential development happening already with 2 projects on the north side of Wolf Road approaching the Milwaukee dead end. There's also potential for further retail development in that area. And I think, as Mark had said earlier, that if this had become a 4-lane road, there probably would automatically be an increase even without considering the development. The question I suppose I should have addressed is what happens if we don't do the jurisdictional transfer? We know that the conditions of the road today are not so good. If we say no to the JT, we would expect that IDOT would simply move any kind of large-scale repair project to the bottom of the list and do some temporary patching in order to keep the road passable. But there are also some stormwater improvements that would happen with this plan. There are sidewalk improvements that would happen with this plan. I guess the short answer to if we say no to the JT, things stay as they are today.
That was my next question. You really think that they won't work on this anyway, that this is, if we don't kick in with this, they're not going to do anything about it? Is that your true feeling?
I suspect, as John said, they'll grind and overlay areas of the roadway, but the major work to be done on this roadway, which is getting rid of the ditches, putting in a curb, putting in a new lane, they will. I do not think that they would be doing that for a long period of time. The most important part of this improvement is to get an extra lane, which would be a turn lane, so people wouldn't have the 2 lanes. You'd have the 1 lane in the middle, so it'd be a lot safer for people turning. And then you would see the cross section of the road instead of the way it looks with the ditches. You would have the road with the curb and gutter.
Okay.
Which is it's a huge difference.
Now going on to the buried power lines, it said in the report that some of the costs for this would be passed on to the residents and commercial businesses and so on?
Substantial amount of it. Yes, there is some that the municipality will undertake, which is some of the connections to the individual users, but the vast majority of these costs would be passed on to the users.
Okay, and by substantial, it's not a huge amount per resident. It's all the funding for that project will be passed on to everybody. That's not a huge amount. In other words, it's not, residential comes out to $74 over 3-4 months, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Just a thought on this. Can that program be implemented in other parts of the village as well with a similar payment?
Yep.
ComEd, that's the way ComEd works, these types of programs. They will spread the cost out throughout all residents, but yes, we can use that program anywhere in the village that we'd like to bury power lines.
Well, that's good to know and good to keep in our back pocket, because it's not a huge cost to the community.
Well, the residents, there's a lot of residents, so the residents don't pay a lot, but it does get expensive for some of the businesses.
And if I may, Trustee Lang, asterisk what I just said, ComEd will bury power lines if there's another project happening because they have to deal with the power lines anyway. So while the answer is correct that they will do that anywhere in town, I think it needs to be associated with another project in order to get them out in a timely manner.
Okay, and then the long-term maintenance fund that we discussed, would it be something that we'd be kicking into starting, well, the year after we did the project, for instance, and would we physically be kicking in money?
No, Director Janik is correct that the way he broke it out was just to get a good understanding of the total value. Present value dollars, the road for this section is worth about $3.5 million to replace, I'm sorry. If we were then to have a surf fund type program for every street, we would be kicking in then approximately $100,000. The answer to your question is no, we wouldn't physically be transferring money anywhere every year. What we would do, though, is add it to the list of the CIP.
Sure.
And that, because it is such a high number, would probably take it, the full allocation for a year in the CIP.
And since it's such an important fund because it pays for an expensive piece of future road, how can we set up this board and future boards from not borrowing from it, not kicking in the full amount as needed every year so that money truly is there after 34 years?
I think a policy which is going to come up for discussion along with the CIP is the best way to do it. Having a written policy that says, certainly nothing binds future boards, but it certainly puts pressure on them to consider the reason that this board passed a fiscal policy.
Okay. And then final question, the $5 million that we saw up there, where would we look for funding for that? How would we pay for that?
Well, I guess we'd have to split it into parts. As Director Janik mentioned, there is the 80-20 grant that we are using and have been approved for Dundee Road. We've already met with our consultants, and they are looking into whether this road would qualify for the same grant program. If that's the case, that's a substantial reduction to the overall cost of the program. The rest would come from CIP. There is some TIF availability here, the ability to use TIF funds to pay for some of this. And in fact, that would be the majority of how we pay for this.
Great. Okay, thank you for answering my questions.
Trustee Juris and then Trustee Brady.
Thanks. Go back to the South Wolf Road slide that you had north of Jeffrey. And real quick, while you're doing that, how old is the traffic count study that you guys did?
Approximately 2 years.
2 years. Okay. To the west of the site that we're looking at right now where the fencing is, based on the plan over at Heritage Park, are they planning on having an entrance way there, an exit way there with some parking in that for their facilities, future facilities?
No, there will not be an entrance on this side except for pedestrians. There won't be
No parking or anything like that?
No. No. This entire length, well, not the entire length, but say 2/3 to 3/4 of this length of the road will all be a detention basin, relatively deep. There'll be a fence there, not as tall as the one here, but see-through fence, and there'll be a sidewalk. But this whole length is going to be part of the detention compensatory storage system for the park.
Okay. Well, I think what the programs that they're going to probably be doing over there in the new park, you're going to see more and more activity on Wolf Road, let's be honest. And 2 years ago, having a 13,000 count study over there, I'm sure that number's higher than it was today than it was 2 years ago. Regarding burial of power lines, how do we pay for the burial of the power lines on Milwaukee Avenue? Anybody know? Do we go to the residents and the businesses on their electric bills, or where did that money come from?
I honestly don't recall, Michael, Tony.
I think that must have been before my time.
It was before your time. Not before Mr. Stavros's, though. Father time.
I believe that was all incorporated into, I'm not sure if it was out of the general fund, but we did pay for all the connections to all the businesses out there. And we did pay for all the street lighting out there, as well as the sidewalks. And I assume that the burial was probably the same way. I don't know what fund it came out of, though.
I actually think that it was the same program that we're talking about now through ComEd. We will find out and get back to the board.
That worked.
Absolutely.
If you think about it, we have 6 streets in this community. And correct me if I'm wrong. That go north and south, and Wolf Road being one of them. That's it. And to me, Wolf Road is in dire need of improvement. It really is. And you're right, IDOT, if we don't do something, IDOT's going to close our eyes to it. They're not going to help us. But then again, we got to be conscious of how we're going to pay for future replacement of that street when it comes 25, 30 years from now. You know, jurisdictional transfers are the wonderful things, and years ago that seemed to be the trend. And if you look at all the development in town that the Village of Wheeling is maintaining, plowing, fixing, constantly of developments, it's a scary thing. And there was no plan back then, back in the Mr. Hine days, to put monies aside. Well, I'm going back that far. You look at some of the developments in town, and that has taken away from capital improvements throughout other parts of the town as well. But you're right, we have to have a plan with this thing, because it's going to cost the future generation, whoever sits up here, a lot of money to repair that street to the new standard.
Jurisdictional transfers are unfortunately the future for IDOT. They have no money, and they see JTs as a way of fixing and getting out of the business, right? Because, as you just said, they recognize the cost of these repairs and replacements as an ongoing deficit for them. So it can be absolutely considered an unfunded mandate, as the state is known to do, and rely on local jurisdictions to make up that difference. One thing that we need to consider and needs to be said is, if we do go forward with this, while there is clearly a benefit and an opportunity here, because not only are we getting street lighting, but sidewalks that work hand in hand with our active transportation plan, and a new street and access. If we use TIF money for this, it will be a major hit to our fund balance for all the TIF districts. So we do need to consider that this is now becoming a priority in the community that will take a substantial amount of our TIF funds out of the available pool, at least in the short term.
Well, a lot of it's not even in the TIF. South Wolf Road isn't.
That's correct. Some of it isn't. A majority is, but that's correct.
And then just a piece north. I mean, the TIF really doesn't start till north of Strong on Wolf Road too. From Dundee Road to Strong, it's not a TIF. Mm-hmm. So you're right. There's pieces, but where do you get the other part of it? Okay, that's all I have for now.
Trustee Bader.
How did we make out when we took over Wheeling Road? Did the county totally rebuild that for us and turn over and say, here you go? Or did
they did.
They did. They did all the work.
As far as I know, they did all the work. Wheeling Road, both north and
how's that working out for us? How many years has that been now?
I know that Public Works does spend a good amount of money repairing the concrete on Wheeling Road south of Hintz. Tony, do you have any comment?
The last 4 years, I think that we've spent about $500,000 in patchwork out there.
What year, do you remember approximately what year we took that over?
Not sure.
About 10 years ago, Tony?
I'm thinking it's about 12 or 14.
To be fair, a lot of the problems on Wheeling are due to flooding in the area that are causing these problems, versus, I don't think it would be typical that we would have to be spending that much money. Please correct me if I'm wrong. That we would be spending that much money after only 10 years to do repair work, say, on Wolf Road.
Well, he's not talking, he's talking about south of Hintz, which is all concrete. There's no flooding on the roadways there. That's all the concrete.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of north of
and north of
Hintz. Sorry.
Yeah. We have that? Is that our jurisdiction? North of Hintz? On Wheeling Road?
We own north of Hintz, yeah.
All the way to where? Dundee Road?
Yes.
Okay.
So then that could be...
We overlaid that a few years ago.
Just an overlay?
That was a total reconstruction project, which
that was big.
We couldn't absorb, so we put a Band-Aid on that for the temporarily, did an overlay on that.
So those repairs really are attributable to truck traffic?
That's truck traffic,
okay.
And probably...
elevations.
The county constructed it, and that leaves something maybe to be desired.
Mark, in your presentation, you also mentioned south of Manchester already has been taken over by the village on Wolf Road.
That's correct.
To what extent?
From Manchester down to Marquardt, I believe.
So we stopped short of the bottleneck there, right?
That's correct, and then it goes down to 2 lanes. That's a section that trustee Lang was asking about previously, and it doesn't look like that's going to be part of it.
That's in Prospect Heights?
Well, part of it's on Prospect Heights, part of it's Wheeling. The west side is Wheeling, east side is Prospect Heights, and that goes all the way down to Camp McDonald.
Okay. One of the things I had a little trouble with, and I think I understand it, is, you mentioned that the cost, the residential cost of burying these power lines. That isn't paying for the $4.5 million. I think that's the individual homes that Edison will bring the power to the home. If you look at the number $74 over a 3-pay period, total cost, $74 to bury power lines, you can't even get a machine out for $74 to dig. And so that isn't going to cover anything. It's got to be something related to the cost of burying homes from the main line to maybe from the transformer to the home or something of the sort.
Well, I believe there's approximately 12,000 residences. I'm not sure if that's correct or not. I believe there's somewhere around 12,000 residences in the village.
No, this is
Apartments,
village-wide.
single family.
This is going to be spread
Everybody in the
village-wide.
village is paying it.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh.
This isn't just specifically that
No, it
area.
makes
That's
sense.
correct.
Okay.
It's a joint effort,
Okay.
the team.
All right, hang on 1 minute, I gotta get back to, hit the wrong button, excuse me. All right. Will there be walks on both sides, one 8-foot and one 5-foot?
That's correct.
Okay, good. We talked about lighting, we keep talking about lighting, we keep talking about decorative lighting, and you keep showing us boxes 30 feet in the air, which you mentioned here. You go to page 38, and look at the street lighting that you gave us a picture there, where is it, in Northbrook?
It's a photograph.
Look at the
But
street light.
in any event, the ones that we are assuming would be the same ones that are on Milwaukee and those.
That's a residential street, Mark. We don't need 30-foot high highway lights. This is a residential street. These type of lights would be perfect for that street. I just don't understand, what do we do? There's no trucks allowed. There's one lane each way with a turn lane. You don't need, and so you're talking Milwaukee with five lanes wide. This is 3 lanes wide. These lights would suffice quite nicely. And I think it'd be a little bit more in keeping with some of us up on the board here would like to see in the way of decorative street lighting on some of our streets instead of these shoe boxes or whatever we want to call them. But please look into these kind of lights. I don't know if the cost probably is just no different than doing the pole and the head.
They'd definitely be a lot more money.
Well,
But we can look into that.
you need a lot more money than what we got out here in front here.
We can come back to the board with options for lighting. Our code does lay out some restrictions as to what is required, but we can come back to the board with a full discussion.
We've talked about this, we've had workshops on, the Plan Commission has spent 4 or 5 months looking at it, and nobody listens when we say we'd like to see a little bit nicer looking lights on some of our streets. Major highway streets, Dundee, Milwaukee Avenue, 83 sections of it, yes, I agree. Those are needed because it's a high traveled, a little faster paced highway. Wolf Road is a residential street, it goes by schools, et cetera, et cetera. Now, and we're talking about going all the way up to Milwaukee Avenue. There's only about, 1,000 feet of power lines to bury north of Wolf Road, north of Dundee Road.
It's more than 1,000 feet, I believe. We could break it out and take a look.
It starts by Prairie Park and rounds the corner, if I'm not mistaken. Everything else is buried there already. Burying the power lines. This has been a vision that we've been working on and trying to formulate for years. I'm going back 10, 12 years, my Plan Commission days, when we talked about what do we have to do to increase the aesthetics of our community. What does one of the Wheeling's worst aspects. I go back to the late 60s, early 70s, when on the front page of the Daily Herald, they had a picture of Dundee Road with the power lines, and all it said was ugly. And I'll never forget that. You look at these other communities that have buried their power lines on their major streets or on their even their secondary streets, the look of the community improves 200%. I know Wolf Road has no value as far as producing any revenue from businesses or anything else, but it is a major roadway through our community. And if we're going to start a program of seriously burying power lines, which I think we must, now is the time. If you don't take the opportunity to do it when you're tearing the whole thing up, forget about it. It's never going to happen. We're not going to go back in there 10 years from now, rip up all the sidewalks and the streets and everything else and bury power lines. It's not going to happen. Now is the time. I agree. We should go out and see who we can get to help finance it.
There are no grants that I'm aware of that help for burial of power lines. If we want to do this, it's going to be the ComEd.
Whatever. You know, I remember when the decision came around for the board to make on whether we should put streetlights on McHenry Road. We don't have the money. Well, at least put the conduits in so you don't have to tear everything up. We don't have the money. I have yet to hear anybody mention streetlights on McHenry Road. They'll never happen. They will never happen because we didn't do it when we had the opportunity. Now the costs are 3 times as much. If we don't do it here now on Wolf Road, forget about burying power lines. It'll never happen. If we don't do it here, if we don't do it there, if we don't put lights over here, you know, what is our vision for the community? Where are we going? What are we looking for? We're trying to improve the looks of our community so we can all be proud of our town. We have everything we need. Yeah, maybe the timing isn't right. Unfortunately, you can't always depend on that. But if you don't do it now, you're saving money if you do it now. If you don't do it now, it'll never get done. So that's all I have to say. I'd like to see everything get done that has to be done, and let's do it once and get it over with and do it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Brady. Trustee here?
Thank you. I'll be short. First of all, I want to thank you very much for putting this together. This is long overdue, and I've always been a proponent of redoing Wolf Road. I have no problems. I think the state has got our feet to the fire here either way. I think we have to take it over because obviously they're not going to repair it. And it's going to deteriorate further down the road, no pun intended. But I don't have any problems with burying the power lines. I do have a problem, though, the cost associated with it. We just spoke about that earlier, about increasing the cost to the residents for electricity and gas for capital improvement projects. I'd like to see how we could fund this in a different fashion. Just a mere $74 over for 4 months. I think there's people out there that have fixed incomes, and this could be devastating to them in regards to trying to pay their electric bill. And that would be one of the biggest concerns. And then as you've outlined in here, even with large industrial buildings, the amount of money they'll be paying. We've got to figure out a way of how to finance this. May it be through the capital improvement fund, you know, pay it over a period of time. I don't know. I mean, sure, it would be nice to have them buried. Is it essential for aesthetics? Yes. But for practical reasons, I still have my druthers on how we're going to pay for it. But if you were to ask, should we bury them, I'd say yes, but we need to find out, other than what's listed here, how we can pay for it and not tax nickel and dime the residents to death. Thanks.
Did you, Trustee Hine?
Thank you. I'm all in favor of taking over Wolf Road and making it a part of the village street system. However, I would really like to look into that cost of burying those power lines to see what we can do to offset that cost. It's a very expensive proposition. We're all looking to upgrade the appearance of our village, and we know that some of the power lines are not the best in the world. Some of the power lines that have been in Wheeling right now have been here since ever. But there's got to be a way of enhancing the aesthetics of a community without having to spend that kind of money. I don't know what the staff, you're going to have to be very creative and come up with maybe more decorative lighting and stuff, things like this. But as far as spending that kind of money for the power lines, I would really like to look into that very, very close.
Thank you.
Mark, could you go back to the first slide, just so we can go down the list? I think I understand direction. There were 4 items on the list. The first 3, I think everyone is agreeing with. I haven't heard anything in opposition of the JT, the sidewalks, or the roadway lighting and traffic signals, taking into account that we will have to have a discussion on the type of street lighting. And certainly we will come back to the board with that. This graphic is meant to give the board a reasonable total for how much this project will cost. Obviously, we will come back to the board with more details before we get in debt in any of this. Burial of ComEd overhead power lines, I think Madam President, if you would take a vote, what I would say is we can come back to the board with more detail on burying the power lines. This is not a decision that you need to say yes or no to today. However, these numbers, the $4.5 million does come from ComEd. That is their number for their costs for the project, and they would need to have some lead time in preparing for the project. So we can come back to the board with more detail on it in a short amount of time so that you can make a decision then. So I did just want to say that before we take a vote on number 4.
So we will take the vote on number 4, burial of the ComEd overhead power lines. Trustee Hein?
Would you repeat that, please?
The burial of the ComEd overhead power lines. Do or not do? Or to give direction?
I would rather give direction to staff to come up with some other ideas other than...
But otherwise, you don't have a problem with the
taking over the
burial?
street? No, I have no problem with that.
All right, thank you. Trustee Juris?
Well, the plan was to bury power lines throughout this community whenever we see fit. The challenge is how we're going to do it and how we're going to fund it.
Cost.
So I'll be anxiously waiting for your game plan.
Well, this is another one of those situations where I feel the need for full disclosure here. There really aren't any other options. I mean, either we pay for it, we, the village, pay for it, which, of course, then is going to take the place of another CIP project, or we go with the ComEd program that is meant to pay for the burial of overhead power lines, which then passes the cost on to the residents and
But
businesses.
isn't this what we said earlier in our previous conversation, is to earmark a project? Here we have a project. So.
Sure, and that's exactly it. Either we pay for it and we can earmark
But
it out
again,
of CIP.
I think, going back to the residents, on one hand, tonight we said we're going to raise your taxes for electricity and gas, and on the other hand, now we're going to say, oh, well, we're going to use that for something else, but here we have a perfect opportunity to maybe earmark some of this money. And I think you can go back and maybe work with these guys. If the state is heck bent on getting rid of that road and pushing it on us, I don't know, you're the expert in this field, and I'm not trying to tell you to do your business, but I would think that they want to get rid of it and maybe negotiate a little bit better to say, okay, we can maybe help you with this, or maybe we can help you do with this. Because otherwise, it's doing them no good to have that road. They want to get rid of them.
We will certainly be aggressive in our negotiations with them, absolutely.
But thank you.
Trustee Link has a question also.
Prior to everyone voicing their opinion on that, is there a way of spreading that over 12 months? Would they allow that, or do they have to it has to be 3 or 4 months?
They do it over 4 months, which is the construction period.
They charge the money while they're doing the construction. So after the first month, they spend X amount of money, then they charge that. So they wanted to get their money
Immediately?
right away. If there's going to be a delay, then the village somehow would have to come up with some money and then charge that money themselves, get the money back from the users after that. But one trustee here, when you talking about IDOT relative to ComEd, maybe it's possible that IDOT would negotiate with ComEd to reduce the cost, but you are talking about two separate entities, two large entities. IDOT's a governmental agency and ComEd's not, but they do in a lot of ways act like a government. They're just completely separate on this project. The roadway cost and the burial of power lines is actually very similar. It's two major projects. We can, try to see what IDOT would do.
Is this a conservative price? Because otherwise they'll come back and say, well, we're going to have to change the numbers in the 11th hour, and it's going to cost us now this. Is this
Doing this project, the $4.5 million has been looked at for numerous years, and we did just recently go back to ComEd, re-talk this with them and ask them what the number was. I can't guarantee that's 4.5, 4.25, 4.6, but it definitely is going to be
in the ballpark.
Yes.
How about some creative financing? Can anything be done there, like a special assessment, one-time deal on the village portion of the real estate tax bill? Trustee Brady brings up, putting more on the real estate tax bill so people can write it off versus hitting everybody on the electric bill. Is there some type of mechanism out there or some kind of tool out there we can be creative where it's not shell shock to those who are trying to pay rent in this community or small businesses here? It's equal across the board?
I'll give you the answer that is, I don't know, but we'll look into it. But I will say this also, that I think whatever other opportunities there are to pay for this, it would come down to if, as Director Janik said, there are two completely different entities here. So ComEd is saying, listen, it costs us $4.5 million. The reason they only spread it out over 4 months is they don't want any of their money going into the game. So they're paying their contractors with the money that's coming in on a monthly basis. So they've got no capital outlay. So I think to your point, if we did anything, the village would have to write the check for the 4.5. We can then make it up perhaps through some other kind of, as you said, creative financing that would then be attached to the tax bill. And I don't know that that's the case. We can look into it, but I think that's the only way it would work with ComEd, is that we would have to write the check, and then we would find out a way to reimburse ourselves, which still accomplishes the goal.
If I might, how about, because this is probably not going to be the only area that this is ever going to come up in. We've always talked about, forcing developers to bury power lines in front of their development as they come in along our major streets. But there's going to be a lot of areas where there aren't going to be any development. There's existing businesses and that. What if we can form some sort of a SSA for an area? That would the people who would be benefiting from it and benefiting from the fact that their property values would go up without power lines hanging in front of their house would be the ones that over a period of years wouldn't be hurt so bad, but yet they'd the ones paying for it.
Sure, if I can. An SSA can be created for an area that benefits, it's a special service area that benefits from the project. And with an SSA, you will not be taxing everybody in the community, only the areas that are benefited. A district would essentially be created. There's a process whereby the property owners and voters in the district can vote down an SSA. If 51% vote against it, they can knock it out. But if they don't, the way that would work is a bond would be issued. The village would issue an SSA bond, and the bond would be paid for by the taxes that are placed upon the property tax bills. So that is a way to do it without taxing the community at large, only taxing the areas that are benefited.
Just to add to that, though, I think looking at the financial side of that answer, Right now, the cost is, as we talked about, $74 per residential, and divided it by residential, commercial, small industrial, large industrial. Those are the numbers if you divide it by the total number of electric users in the community. If you divide it by a chunk, which is what an SSA is, those numbers would, you would have to take a mortgage out to pay for that.
Okay.
But to your previous point, and it was a very good point, the board could have a policy that wouldn't answer this question, but that says that all future development, you will bury your power lines. There are a couple of restrictions there. I know in the past the board has been rightfully concerned that may chase away some development because it's an astronomical cost. And I think that's the reason that we don't have that on the books today. And I think ComEd has a bit of a problem if a development is in the middle of a line where it goes from overhead to buried to overhead. So some obstacles, but it's something that we can talk about. And if the board would like to institute a policy like that, we certainly could.
I thought we had one already.
So we'll continue down the line for trustee here. Burying of the power lines.
I have to have more information on how we're going to pay for it. I'm not against going and burying the power lines, but I have a big problem on how we're going to pay for it, because there were several things thrown out here.
Trustee Brady.
Yeah, I'm 100% for it, but I too don't want to hurt the taxpayers that much. So we got to come up with something creative, a way that we can finance this, that either we as a village or somehow get it paid for.
Trustee Lang.
And I agree.
And I also.
What we will do then is come back specifically with some options and a more detailed discussion on burial of overhead power lines. And we can get some more information from ComEd and think a bit about what other financial tools we have that we can consider. But with this information, I think we can start to go back to IDOT and begin negotiations with the idea that a jurisdictional transfer is an option as long as we come up with some beneficial deal points that will work for the Village of Wheeling.
But I think you got 3 TIFs that you can work with. The southeast TIF, the south TIF, and the north TIF, okay? And getting to the southeast TIF, this Wolf Road is an entranceway into that airport that complements that airport. The north TIF, everything that's going on north of Milwaukee and Lake Cook Road. So I think you got tools, financing tools, and I'm telling you, if you look at the archives, you're going to see a lot of the infrastructure done on Milwaukee Avenue. A lot of that was TIF fund revenue that paid for that.
And you're absolutely right. Wherever we can, this would certainly be, these are certainly TIF eligible expenses, and where we can, we absolutely would recommend using TIF. It's the only option we've got.
Okay.
Thank you.
What about the sidewalks and the lighting?
I think that everybody said that would go.
Everything was, the question was.
The works.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I already got my hot dog.
Do we have any official communication? If not, then I would ask for a motion to go into executive session to discuss pending, probable, and imminent litigation.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by trustee Brady, second by trustee Agiris. Roll call, please.
Trustee Hein?
Yes.
Trustee Brady?
Yes.
Trustee Hare?
Yes.
Trustee Lang?
Yes.
Trustee Agiris?
Yes.
President Riscato?
Yes. Board will go into executive session at 8:10.
He's not coming.